It is late afternoon, November 1941. Under clear skies off the Western Australian coast, Captain Joseph Burnett of HMAS Sydney spotted an unfamiliar Dutch vessel. Expecting routine identification, he signalled the ship to identify itself. As Sydney drew closer, demanding the ship's identity, the seemingly Dutch freighter failed to respond coherently, prompting suspicion. Suddenly, Dutch flags dropped, revealing the sight of a German ensign. With realization dawning, Burnett braced for battle as the raider shed its disguise, unleashing a storm of gunfire and torpedoes. Thanks to Odoo for sponsoring this video. Odoo is your go-to all-in-one management software, perfect for simplifying your business operations. Whether you need invoicing, accounting, project management, or an intuitive website builder, Odoo has you covered. With Odoo's website builder, you can tailor your website to your exact needs. Customize blocks with images, text, videos, and animations. Odoo's AI integration helps you generate and refine content, ensuring your website stands out. Change typography, colors, and image shapes effortlessly, and easily integrate a webshop or newsfeed. Your first Odoo application is free for life, including unlimited hosting and support, plus a free personalized domain for 1 year. As your business grows, you can add more applications to meet your evolving needs. Give it a try and see how easy it is. Create your website for free today with Odoo by visiting the link in the description and experience the power of a truly intuitive management platform. In 1941, Australia found itself in a precarious geopolitical position amidst the escalating global conflict of World War II. Its main dangers stemmed from the expanding military ambitions of Axis powers, particularly Japan, whose aggressive expansionist policies posed a direct threat to Australia's security and maritime trade routes in the Pacific. Australia's fleet, though relatively modest compared to major naval powers, served as a crucial deterrent against maritime threats. Although Australia remained free from enemy attack until November, at least 4 German surface raiders were in the vicinity. The raider activity began in February, when the Comet traversed the station after activities at Nauru, followed by the Orion in March. The Comet was also spotted at Kerguelen in March, before entering the western part of the Australia station in April. In May, the Comet met with the captured whaler Adjutant, and together they laid mines in the approaches to Lyttelton and Wellington, before heading for the Pacific. In July, the Comet cruised the southwest Pacific unsuccessfully before moving northeast towards the Panama Isthmus, where it sank several ships in August, including the Australind and Kota Nopan. Another German raider, Atlantis, followed a similar path, entering the Atlantic in April and sinking multiple ships, including Australian Rabaul, before re-entering the Indian Ocean in July, and eventually passing through the Australia station to enter the Pacific in August. In September, Atlantis captured the Norwegian ship Silvaplana, before meeting with Comet, which had returned from the Galapagos Islands. The two ships then headed their separate ways to Germany, with Comet successfully reaching Hamburg in October while Atlantis was sunk in November. On December 3, 1940, Cormoran, the most modern German raider at the time, embarked on its maiden and final voyage from Gotenhafen, circumventing the British blockade disguised as a Soviet freighter and escaping into the ocean. Commanded by Lieutenant Commander Anton Detmers, Cormoran was heavily armed. A veteran of the seas, Detmers had honed his skills since joining the Navy at a youthful 19. From service aboard the cruiser Köln to commanding torpedo boats and destroyers, he had proven his mettle, earning combat experience during the Norwegian campaign. At the helm of the Cormoran, Detmers, at the age of 38, was the youngest among his peers in command of German raider vessels. Originally the merchant vessel Steiermark, it was requisitioned by the Kriegsmarine in 1938, dubbed the Cormoran, and became renowned for its stealth and efficiency. Stretching 164 meters in length and spanning over 20 meters in width, she could reach a brisk 33 kilometers per hour. Displacing over 18,000 metric tons, her endurance was staggering, capable of traversing over 135,000 kilometers at a steady pace of 18.5 kilometers per hour, with provisions for a crew of 26 officers and 375 men to endure a marathon voyage of 352 days. She boasted a powerful armament, including 6 naval guns, 2 anti-tank guns, and 5 anti-aircraft guns. Additionally, it carried 6 torpedo tubes with 24 torpedoes. Not content with conventional weaponry alone, she carried 360 ship-launched electric mines and 30 mines deployable via her high-speed motor launch. She also housed 2 Arado 196 A1 seaplanes for reconnaissance. On January 6th, it claimed its first prize, the Greek freighter Antonis. 2 weeks later, the British Union was sunk to the depths. On January 29, she sank 2 more ships, the British Afric Star and Eurylochus, almost 1,300 kilometers west of Freetown. By February 1st, it crossed the equator, and on the 7th, it met the supply ship Nordmark, transferring 170 prisoners. Later, on February 25th, it encountered the raider Penguin south-southeast of St. Helena, which was bound for Kerguelen for refitting. Cormoran then moved north to operate near the equator, but faced engine trouble and had no operational success. On March 16th, Cormoran met the returning German raider Scheer in the Atlantic. Throughout March and April, it remained in the Atlantic, sinking several more ships, including the British ships Agnita, Canadolite, and Craftsman, and the Greek steamer Nikolaios DL. On April 19th, Cormoran met Atlantis in the South Atlantic before rounding the Cape into the Indian Ocean. Captain Detmers directed the transformation of Cormoran's appearance, painting her hull black to mimic a Japanese vessel for operations in the Indian Ocean. In June, Cormoran sank the Yugoslav steamer Velebit and encountered the Australian steamer Mariba, which it sunk after a distress call by Captain Skinner. Cormoran then underwent an overhaul south of Ceylon and cruised over a wide area from the Australia station to the northwest Indian Ocean until September, when it sank its final victim, the Greek steamer Stamatios Embirikos. In October, already 258 days at sea without land in sight, Cormoran rendezvoused with the supply ship Kulmerland and provisioned from it. Afterward, it intended to lay mines off Perth, but changed plans upon hearing of a convoy escorted by HMS Cornwall, deciding instead to investigate the area off Shark Bay. By mid-November, Cormoran steered towards its new objective. Meanwhile, this German raiding did not go unnoticed among the Allied powers, especially the Australians. From February 1941, HMAS Sydney's activities primarily involved patrols and convoy escort duties within Australian waters. This Leander-class light cruiser had earned its spurs in the short period of war. Deployed to the Mediterranean in 1940, it participated in the Battle of Cape Spada, Calabria, Otranto Strait, and escorted Malta convoys. In January 1941, she was ordered to return to Australia to protect its waters against rogue German auxiliary raiders. HMS Sydney, originally christened HMS Phaeton, commenced her maritime journey when her keel was laid down on July 8, 1933. Initially designated as part of Great Britain's naval arsenal, she transitioned to the Australian Navy in June 1934. Among the trio of modified Leander-class vessels, Sydney stood tall as a member of the Australian Perth-class light cruisers, boasting an overall length of 169 metres and a beam of 17 metres. Fully laden, she displaced 9,080 tons. Her main armament comprised 8 6-inch guns, distributed across 4 twin turrets, positioned in pairs fore and aft. Complementing this firepower were 4 4-inch guns, along with 12 1.5-inch and 4 3-pound anti-aircraft guns. Adding to her offensive capabilities were 8 21-inch torpedo tubes, enhancing her versatility on the high seas. A single seaplane was embarked, nestled on a solitary catapult situated amidships between her twin stacks. Upon returning to Fremantle, Captain Joseph Burnett assumed command. Burnett, a Naval College graduate, became the 3rd graduate to become captain. He was highly regarded for his professional achievements and expertise in gunnery. He had previously served as Deputy Chief under the Chief of the Australian Naval Staff, Admiral Ragnar Colvin. Under Burnett's command, Sydney conducted routine escort missions and patrols throughout May, June, and most of September. including dutifully escorting troopships to destinations such as Malaya, New Zealand, and Suva, as well as patrolling off Melbourne. On November 11th, Sydney was tasked with escorting the troopship Zealandia to Singapore before relinquishing escort duties and returning. Burnett telegraphed their estimated time of arrival would be November 20th as she leisurely cruised to the southwest. But crossing Sydney's path on November 19th was what appeared to be an unidentified freighter. That afternoon, with good weather, Sydney encountered an unidentified vessel off the Western Australian coast. Unbeknownst to Burnett, this was the German raider Cormoran, which had been cruising at sea for months. Aboard the Cormoran, Detmers gave orders to hoist Dutch colours and attempted to pass as a Dutch vessel. He ordered full speed ahead and altered course, attempting to evade Sydney by heading into the sun. However, Sydney was much faster. She signalled Cormoran to hoist its signal letters, prompting Cormoran to broadcast a misleading message. At around 5:15 p.m., Sydney approached almost alongside the German raider Cormoran to starboard, at a distance of less than 2 kilometres. Both ships were travelling at approximately 15 knots in a west-southwest direction. Sydney, fully armed and ready for combat, signalled Cormoran, asking its destination. Cormoran replied, Batavia. However, Sydney then signalled Cormoran to reveal its secret identification sign, which the raider could not interpret. Realising that they would have to engage in battle, Cormoran immediately dropped its disguise, struck the Dutch colours, hoisted the German flag, and opened fire with guns and torpedoes at 5:30 p.m. In response, Sydney also fired its guns and also launched torpedoes. Cormoran's initial salvos found their mark, hitting Sydney's bridge and director tower. Sydney fired back, but its initial salvos missed Cormoran. The close range of the engagement allowed Cormoran to effectively use its anti-aircraft machine guns and 3.7-inch guns. The cruiser's subsequent salvos struck Sydney on the bridge and amidships. Sydney's turrets A and B were disabled, and after a few salvos, Turret X responded with accurate fire, hitting Cormoran's funnel and engine room. Meanwhile, one of Cormoran's torpedoes hit Sydney under turrets A and B. Despite Sydney's initial retaliation, with hits on Cormoran's funnel and boiler room, the raider pressed on, inflicting further damage. With Sydney's bow low in the water, the ship attempted to turn towards Cormoran, possibly to ram. However, during the manoeuvre, turret B exploded and fell overboard due to Cormoran's sustained fire. As Sydney passed under Cormoran's stern, heading southward and losing momentum, Cormoran, though damaged and on fire in the engine room, continued firing at Sydney from a distance of approximately 4,000 metres. As fires raging on board of both ships, Sydney fired 4 torpedoes as Cormoran attempted to bring its broadside to bear. However, Cormoran's engines began to fail, and the ship just narrowly avoided the torpedoes as they passed astern. Shortly afterwards, Cormoran's engines completely broke down. Meanwhile, Sydney, crippled and on fire from the bridge to the aft funnel, continued to move slowly southward. Although its main turrets may have been disabled, Sydney fired its secondary armament. Cormoran maintained fire with its port broadside guns until around 5:50 p.m. 30 minutes later, Cormoran fired its last torpedo at Sydney from a range of about 10,000 metres. This torpedo narrowly missed her astern. As dusk descended, after 30 minutes of intense combat, both ships were crippled and engulfed in flames. Cormoran's engine room was in ruins, and with over 200 mines on board, Captain Detmers ordered the crew to abandon ship and began scuttling preparations. Cormoran's boats and rafts were lowered, filled, and cast off, and scuttling charges were set. With the ship's deck ablaze and smoke billowing at midnight, the scuttling charge was detonated, and Cormoran sank rapidly stern first. Of its crew of 393, 78 lost their lives, with most drowned due to the capsizing of an overloaded raft. Meanwhile, Sydney's fate was even more tragic. Not a single crew member of the 645 aboard survived. The ship vanished from sight around 16,000 meters away, heading approximately south-southeast. Only a distant glare in the darkness indicated its presence until it eventually disappeared completely, and she would remain lost for over 60 years. Meanwhile, in Australia, Sydney's failure to return to Fremantle by November 20th sparked concern, compounded by Zealandia's late arrival in Singapore and Sydney's radio silence. Despite an extensive air search by the Royal Australian Air Force, Sydney remained elusive. 4 days later, Trolkas, a British tanker, discovered a raft bearing 25 German naval personnel almost 200 kilometres off Carnarvon. This find raised fears for Sydney's fate, triggering intensive investigations. It was later revealed that Trolkas and Aquitania had rescued German survivors from an encounter involving Sydney, but delays in reporting obscured the full picture. Meanwhile, interrogations of Cormoran's survivors pieced together Sydney's final moments. In total, Cormoran had sunk 10 merchant vessels and Sydney. The circumstances of Sydney's loss remained enigmatic, with questions surrounding Captain Burnett's decisions and the failure to effectively utilise Sydney's resources. It wasn't until March 12, 2008, that Cormoran's wreckage was found. 5 days later, Sydney's wreckage was found as well. Both wrecks are placed under the protection of the Historic Shipwrecks Act of 1976. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please leave a like, it really helps out the channel. If there is a topic, battle, or person you would like to know more about, let me know your thoughts in a comment. I would also like to thank all my patrons and channel members for their generous support. If you enjoy House of History and you want to support my work, consider joining me on Patreon. For just $1 per month, you will already gain early access to all my videos without any in-video advertisements. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.